Okay. You all have a happy Thanksgiving, all right? Love to you and Stephanie, the whole family. All right, Archrise A, are we able to go live? Okay. I think you just pushed the on button, but I could be wrong. All right, let me see. I will refresh. Oh, look, there it's us. That's you and me. Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you so much. Amazing, Archer. Well done. Well done. Friends, many of you I know attempted to tune in on Friday evening, and that we had some technical challenges. Those who were here, the 90 or so individuals that were in person, I know really appreciated and enjoyed what Andre had to say. And because we want to make sure that all in our community are able to have this insight, Andre and I are taking this time this Sunday afternoon, now that religious school is done for the week, taking a little bit extra time to bring you this so that our discussion can be experienced by all of you in the land of live stream. There, Andre, has been much discussion over the past couple weeks surrounding three particular instances where that have drawn immediate reaction from our Jewish community, where black celebrities have made uncomfortable comments. First, Kanye West, of course, in whatever state of mental capacity, tweeted, quote, "I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, it's DEFCON 3 on the Jewish people." And rightfully so. The concerned response from our Jewish community was swift and condemning. A few days later, Brooklyn Nets star Kyrie Irving retweeted the cover of the film Hebrews to Negroes, Wake Up Black America. No other wording accompanied the tweet, but Irving was subsequently suspended by the Nets for 5 games and made to apologize. And then this past Saturday night, which is no longer this past Saturday night, a week ago Saturday night, but on Friday night, it was this past Saturday night, comedian Dave Chappelle, host of Saturday Night Live, in his opening monologue gave his perspective on both of these events, making jokes that invoked Jewish stereotypes about Jewish control in Hollywood and the media. And that brings us to now. Many accusations of anti-Semitism and ethnic insensitivity have been hurled, and the question remains, where do we go from here? How do we identify core issues and work towards resolution? And Andre, I'm so grateful that you've taken this time, that you took the time on Friday night, that you're taking the time today to be able to share your perspective with our community. I know that so many of us who are Jewish but not Jews of color felt deeply concerned and animated and engaged and concerned, disturbed by some of the comments coming from these celebrities in the black community. And I know that as a person of color yourself and as a proud Jew yourself, you experience both of these identities and communities in meaningful and different ways. This must have been a challenging couple weeks for you. Could you share a bit about your reaction for the past couple weeks?
Sure, and thank you for taking the time. And I know that the reaction and response I've been dealing with and having some great conversations with people following our discussion from Friday night. People unanimously have said that this is something that has left them with food for thought, which hopefully will continue. Let's not leave this conversation just here. Hopefully this will be the first of many conversations for many of you to have with friends and with family. My immediate reaction was that of, what former ASU football coach Herm Edwards used to say and used to advise his players, that, you can write stuff out on Twitter, but just don't hit post because it seems to cause a lot of problems after that. I mean, we can all agree that there are pluses and minuses with social media platforms, and sometimes, and I think in a lot of these instances, some things may get posted without a sense of greater context. I always compare it to how you deal with children in a classroom, with students in a classroom. A child may do something that is outside of normative behavior or expected behavior, but it's never just isolated. Generally, sometimes those things are coming from a place that is maybe outside of the environment in which you interact with them. And my first reaction was, these comments didn't just pop up in a vacuum. They must have come from somewhere. So my immediate response was, where is this coming from? And why is it here? And some of the conversations that I began to have with people, my friends, colleagues, was very different than the conversation in the Jewish community, was very different than the conversation I was having in the black community. So I immediately thought that there must be a way to get to truth and reconciliation, that there are years and years of building tensions that have resulted to the incidences of the past 2 weeks, and some of it made me angry, from a Jewish perspective. Having the privilege of being able to ride the fence and have a foot in both camps, the Jewish side of me rightfully said, this is incredibly insensitive and incredibly harmful, and is going to draw a strong reaction from the community. And then, the black side of me said, well, this is coming from a place of years of developing hurt and mistrust between the black that blacks, not in general, but some in the black community, have for the Jewish community. So we can't just leave it there. I think people were just comfortable to just immediately go into their camps and say, this is this and that is that. But there was a real need to have a conversation. The first conversation I had to have was one with myself. How the heck do I process all of this? And how do I react to it? I can see the legitimacy of both sides, but what is the solution? How do we grow a relationship instead of continue to potentially tear one down?
I've been thinking about, and I know you have as well, the way in which the Jewish community for so long was so engaged in the civil rights movement in the 60s in particular. We all know the quote from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who famously said that his feet were praying when he walked alongside Martin Luther King Jr., and that, in so many, large proportion of the freedom riders who came down to the South to register, African Americans, to vote and to be able to participate in our democracy and society during that time, and who faced great risk in doing so, were from our Jewish family.
Mm-hmm.
And now it seems that this has exposed a rift that to some degree already existed between our two communities. And my question is, what do you see about the parallels and about the distinctions between the black experience in America and the Jewish experience in America, particularly in terms of our historical traumas and in terms of the current fears that animate the communities?
Yeah, and I think that those historical traumas led to an understanding during the civil rights movement of a mutually humanistic cause. And I think the leadership of Dr. King, Rabbi Heschel, and countless others really focused around that idea that this isn't just a struggle of black Americans, of Jewish Americans, of indigenous Americans. This is a struggle of humanity. This is a godly struggle where everyone is included in the fight. And the fight had a definition. It was nonviolent. It was about developing positive identity that every human being has value. And then as especially with the post the assassination of Dr. King and government policy, really changing laws that allowed more flexibility for humans of different ethnicities to move to different communities. I mean, just think about it. Like, you and I both, grew up in very close neighborhood, similar neighborhoods in Los Angeles, and probably both grew up in houses that, 50 years prior to us growing up, our parents would not have been able to purchase. I remember seeing the original deed of my parents' first house, and it specifically said on it that, blacks and Jews could not purchase that house. It was legal to have that until laws changed in the 1960s. Once a lot of those laws began to change, there was upward mobility, I guess, for both communities. But now it became a question of identity versus assimilation. And Jews moved to the suburbs. And the claim from the black community is that while Jews moved to the suburbs with white flight in the late 60s, early 70s, that they left the black community behind. And there was not a sense of hatred towards the Jewish community, but just a sense of, where was my friend? I thought you were my friend. So that grew into a mistrust. Well, we we partnered on this, and now, because everyone could go their separate ways, they did. And then, of course, it was a struggle for identity versus assimilation in the black community, because, all right, now that the laws have been changed and now that we are participating, where is our part? Where do we go? And, of course, with the changing of laws is one thing, but the changing of minds is a whole other. There was discrimination on other levels, and there was a need for a partnership in a sense that, and the feeling was that partner and that friend went away. Whether that was true or not, certainly not in every case. Certainly there were still effective partnerships. The development of the NAACP, the development of the Hebrew of the Negro College Fund. These were important endeavors, the support for historic black colleges. These are important moves that the black and the Jewish community worked on together, but it seemed no longer to have that sense of importance.
Andre, I don't know if I've told you about my grandmother. Her memory should be for a blessing. From Archer, who's operating tech for us right now, is actually named that when she was young, she was the first Jewish person to attend the nursing school at Ohio State University, at the Ohio State University. Oh. And that at the same time, there was also the first black student in the nursing school there. And the dean at the time said, I'm never going to let a K-word or an N-word graduate from my school. And they were not allowed to dorm with the other nursing students, and they had to be in the foreign students' dorm and room together, and they were excluded in lots of different ways. And each of them were able to complete the program and become the first nursing graduates from that program and experience this discrimination that pushed them together in a meaningful way. And much of my grandmother's life work was in service and relationship with the black community at the different public schools where she served as a school nurse. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about that and about the history that we share also in terms of the legacies of anti-Semitism, in particular the tragedy of the Shoah, mm-hmm. The legacy of slavery and Jim Crow, and the way in which it now seems that within the Jewish community there is a racist element, and within the black community, obviously there's been an uncovering of real anti-Semitism that's reflective of these different, latent or dormant expressions and feelings. And I want to ask you a little bit personally about your own experience. Can you describe a time where you felt alienated in the black community because of your Judaism, and for that matter, a time where you felt out of place in the Jewish community because of being a person of color, a Jew of color?
It's interesting, I always say that I've lost count of how many times in my life that I've been called the N-word. I've literally lost count. I can't even, I don't even, when somebody says it, it just kind of rolls off. I don't even, it's almost a joke. You can't even come up with something even better. It's such old hat. It is interesting, sort of kind of wearing these two identities that people, when they hear that, oh, you're black and you're Jewish, and people say, well, don't you want, what is it, you want everybody to hate you? You know, like, and I like, no, it's actually a quite prideful thing that I walk with my identity and feel strong about it. But I have faced, the reality is I have faced these, you know, discriminatory moments on both sides. I always, like, I've been black a lot longer than I've been Jewish, but I remember growing up being, you know, one of two, and sometimes the only black kid on my hockey teams growing up. And just the amount, even you think that you'd be safe in Southern California, you know, playing these things, the amount of, you know, racial slurs being hurled at me on a constant basis. I learned a very important lesson in my life from my mother at a very young age, that and she got it from her love of Dr. King, you know, that you don't lean over. When somebody calls you, if somebody berates you, stand straight up with your shoulders back and keep going. Let them, because once they see that those things can't stop you, then they will back down. Their whole goal is to try to dehumanize you, but you have to have dignity and strength in yourself. And as a Jew of color, you know, I often get the question, well, you don't look Jewish. And I think that that's actually the most harmful expression of all. What do you mean I don't look Jewish? I'm wearing a kippah, I'm wearing a talis. Like, what do you mean? I'm reading Torah, I'm, you know, teaching. What do you mean I don't look Jewish? What is it that it's supposed to look like?
Teppy the milkman, by
Yeah,
the way,
like, you know.
is the answer. You know, I don't know if you know, for years I've done, both with our Introduction to Judaism students, conversion students, and here in the religious school, an exercise where I ask someone with no other information to draw a Jew. And the goal is that someone would be able to draw a self-portrait, right? That would be the optimal. But so often, what do people do? They draw the things that are distinctively Jewish.
Yes.
Yarmulke, payas, disproportionately people who are male and pale, right?
Yep.
And that the essence of that exercise is to be able to have a conversation about what the things that we think of in our heads look Jewish versus what is actually Jewish. I told you when we were talking earlier this week about my colleague who is also a Jew of color and would staff Israel trips with me, and that every single time when we'd be on our way to the land of Israel, we would be stopped at El Al security, and more time than for any of the students, more time than for me, was me being interviewed about him. Do I really know Chaim? How long have I known him? Was he born Jewish? Does he really belong here? And I know that in so many different Jewish spaces, right, especially where people are otherwise unfamiliar with a person, right? Andre, when you go to a new community and you walk into Davin, people look at you askance.
Yeah.
And that's a painful thing. And I suspect that when you have conversations with those that are part of the black community who might ask you, why are you Jewish?
Yeah, and during my own conversion experience, I lost a number of my friends, of my black friends who I grew up with. I've known these people since I was, you know, tiny, who could not understand why I left, you know, the church, which was such a strong part of black identity, and why I'm forming this new identity. I mean, some have come to understand over the years, but others just didn't want any part of it. Some of them accused me of becoming white, which is harmful on both sides. Like, I have, last time I checked, I haven't changed, but it's also a hit on the Jewish side of me because Jews don't like to be associated with being white.
I mean, I think that speaks to the nature of the way that nefariousness of anti-Semitism in general, that anti-Semitism as a concept is used to label Jews as whatever a group most demonizes. So for white supremacists, Jews are the ultimate race polluter, right? That was the nature of the Nazis. For anti-colonial leftists, Jews and Zionists are the ultimate colonizers, the ultimate villains in that way, right? And in the same way, it sounds like in some elements of the black community right, where the greatest treachery is whiteness, right? Jews become the ultimate whiteness, even though, of course, people that celebrate whiteness would never include Jews.
Yes, yes.
And they're marching with tiki torches. The Jews will not replace us.
But I think it's also part of a battle for identity in both communities, where I got the reaction from the black community because they felt that I was leaving the fold. And I get the reaction from the Jewish community because, wait a minute, I don't look like what would traditionally would be as part of the fold. And I think that in both communities, this is where a conversation is so important, not only just between these two communities, but in a global sense. We have to celebrate the diversity that comes with being a community. That people, there are a tremendous number of black Jews in the United States, and some who make major contributions to their communities, some who have gone on to become rabbis, and some educators, and some community leaders, and as a black community, we have to celebrate that because they haven't left the fold. They're actually really representing the greatest part of our contributions. And in the Jewish community, understanding that the Ashkenormative sense that we have is not completely true, that we are a beautiful mosaic of people that create a wonderful Jewish picture and Jewish experiences that connect us all, that we can learn from each other and develop new and amazing connections, not only to each other, but connections to our spirituality. I can only think of, that the holiday of, Sigd is coming up, this week. And in Israel, it is seen as not only a celebration of the Ethiopian community and their pilgrimage to Israel and making Aliyah en masse, but also it's a day to understand that the Israeli mosaic is very diverse, and we all take part of it.
And for those that are not familiar, Sigd, which I believe occurs every year on the 29th of Cheshvan, is a significant Jewish festival in the Ethiopian Jewish community, and was made a national holiday in Israel, affirmed by the Knesset, which is one of the reasons that if you have like Hebcal or one of the other Jewish calendar things linked up to your phone so that you know when all the Jewish holidays are, it's on there, and it's like, oh, what's this? And you can learn more about it. It's a deeply meaningful day of celebration for this community, and it speaks to the reality that many of you are familiar with, which is that in Israel, white Jews or white-presenting Jews are the minority, not the majority, that most Jews in Israel are Jews of color, whether Ethiopian Jews or Yemenite Jews or Jews of other Eastern Arabic or North African ancestry, and that so much of the different paradigms that are projected on Israel relate to the experience of racism in this country, and that's an inaccurate portrayal and projection of the American experience on a different place.
Yes.
And that, but I think part of the reality of that phenomena and what we've uncovered and learned from the reactions in both communities and beyond the Jewish and black communities to the tweets of Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, of Kyrie Irving, and most recently Chappelle's humor, is that there are already underlying tensions that have bubbled to the surface. And I wonder what you think has something changed because of these incidences? And if so, what is that? And do you see that as, I mean, obviously it's negative in that we feel hurt and threatened, but in terms of what can come out of this, do you see a potential for something positive as well?
Yeah, I think what it is uncovered, John Stewart put it this way, that when asked about this, he said that this isn't a new wound. This has just put salt in a wound that hasn't healed. And I think what is important for the Jewish community to understand is that this has been a bit of an awakening that, whoa, 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 we didn't realize that there was this rift. We always fantasize about the Heschel and King days and the kumbaya. We kind of have that sense. But that was 60 years ago.
And Heschel wasn't representative of the Jewish community at that time. It's only that, in retrospect, we claim him.
Yeah.
His colleagues at the Jewish Theological Seminary and rabbis throughout America during that time, many were rolling their eyes at his actions, though, of course, there were also those that were aligned and very active in the movement for civil rights.
And also it forced the hand of a lot of Jews that lived in the South, who were trying to balance not being too Jewish, but at the same time trying to balance being part of Southern society. I think this has been an awakening that those days are gone. The vision that we have in our head isn't real, and that there is work to be done. And I think for the Black community, this has been a moment of saying we are hurt. There is hurt, but we have to. This has been an awakening for the Black community in saying, well, is this the proper way to have the conversation? By making broad accusations and anti-Semitic tropes, by claiming that all Jews, the Jews run Hollywood. Is that the proper way to have the conversation?
I mean, I'm told there are a lot of Jews in Hollywood.
There are.
But there's also a lot of people who aren't Jewish. And you commented that it was that Chappelle, on Friday night, you mentioned that Chappelle said there are a lot of Black people in Ferguson.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that they run the place.
His joke, kind of chastising the Black community, was in some ways intelligent. Chappelle's comments, I have a bit of a different reaction to sort of all three. I think Kanye's comments, whatever, as you said, whatever state he was in, I think really are comments that are inappropriate, one, and two, come from this inappropriate expression of anger, not just at the Jewish community, but maybe he found a scapegoat in that moment, which is not unfamiliar to the Jewish community, and I think that's where he gets in trouble. I think Kyrie Irving's reposting of the movie poster comes from a sense of the Black community, particularly Black males, looking for a sense, searching for years and years for a sense of identity and history, an attachment to what is our history, and that's been a struggle for the Black community. Where is it?
Right, you told me your father doesn't have a birth.
Yeah, and my father was born in the late 30s in a suburb, in a rural suburb at the time, a rural suburb of Memphis, Tennessee. Black children in the state of Tennessee were not granted birth certificates. My mother was born in San Antonio, Texas, in the mid 40s. Her birth certificate is an education in and of itself. Her birth certificate has her name, my grandparents' name, what time she was born, and all of the other categories on the birth certificate are filled with the word Negroid. Because accurate birth certificates of weight, of anything else, were not considered necessary. It is a search. When even at birth, you are not given an identity, and historically, when blacks were first brought to the United States, we were counted in the same number and identified in the same way that cattle are identified, and that means we can't search up a historical record of where we came from. And there's always been that hunger to find out who are we really.
And so you think that Kyrie's sharing of this movie, which makes claims about an origin, though, that are rooted in anti-Semitism and about being one of the lost tribes of Israel, etc., is a reflection of that search.
I think it's a reflection of that search, and I'm not giving him a pass at all. But I think he might have turned a blind eye to that part because he was focused on one specific aspect of it.
And Chappelle?
And Chappelle, I think, Chappelle was trying to, in some ways, circle the wagons around the black community and for the black community. But I think at the same time, he was forcing us to have a conversation. He made, comments insensitive to Jews that were received as being insensitive, because the most important is who, if you tell a joke, it's not funny if the other side doesn't laugh. That's the whole point. But at the same time, he also chastised the black community. He chastised Kanye West at the beginning of his monologue by saying, look, you can't say these sorts of things and expect that no one's going to react to them. But his comment about, if the Jews, it's true that there are a lot of Jews in Hollywood, but there are, can't say that they run Hollywood, but if you say that blacks run Ferguson, Missouri, we all see how that worked out. Like, it was a stab that at the black community. It was to use the Yiddish word, it was a zatz at the black community, saying, like, whenever we have these opportunities to make these statements and be in control, like, we turn it, we destroy it, we turn it on ourselves, we end up messing it up, and it ends up just us being angry, and that's not the proper way. I think that what Dave Chappelle was trying to do was trying to force us to begin to have a conversation, while uncovering what he felt were some very uncomfortable truths. And in order to begin a process of reconciliation, you have to begin with the truth. You talked about this a couple weeks ago. That the effect that we have with our words, but our words also have to be truthful, and that's a message conveyed by both King and Heschel. In order for us to really get to a point where we build, we have to talk about the truth. We have to. It was the beginning of the process that resolved apartheid, whether you feel it's resolved or not. But that was the first part, was that everyone had to be uncomfortable with the truth, and then we had to talk about it.
So for all of our congregants who are going to hear you, what is it that we can be doing in the Jewish community to further this work? How should we be reacting to everything that's been going on beyond the defensiveness that each of us show?
Yeah, I think that getting rid of the defensiveness is a key part. We in our society are so used to surviving in echo chambers, whether it be on this issue, whether it be politically, whether it be religiously, whether it be, even in our own neighborhoods, you could be involved in your HOA and everyone's in their echo chambers of people who they agree with. I think we need to take a step out of that comfort zone, because there's no growth in comfort zones. There's growth when we are made to be a little uncomfortable. And I think the first step is for us to converse with someone who may have a different opinion on certain things. And then see a different perspective, which may give you some insight. It may even strengthen your own position. But it's having a conversation. We cannot continue to have conversations with people who think like us, who even look like us, because it makes us feel better. We can grow stronger bridges by understanding what tears them down. And that is an understanding of the truth. And we should do it with no fear. We sing the song, Kol Olam Kulo, Gesher Tzar Ma'od. The world is a narrow bridge. It may be shaky, it may be uncomfortable, you may look down and see the depths of how far you can fall, but hopefully we take a step onto the bridge and walk across, knowing that godliness is our guide, and this has to be our focus. We have to see other human beings as each individually a creation of God. And then we begin to tear down these boxes and walls that we have that separate each and every one of us, and begin to see things as a human experience.
Absolutely. I've preached before about how in the Torah we have that that Aaron and Miriam, the siblings of Moses, get in some trouble from God because they're bad mouthing Zipporah, Moses' wife, who is black. And it says in the Torah, because she's black, that's the reason that they are uncomfortable and bad mouthing her. And I just got to say that if Aaron, who was our high priest, if Miriam, who was our prophetess that led our women in dance and joy and celebration and was able to channel godliness, both of them at different moments who were among the highest of the high, nonetheless, right, that they were poisoned by the dangers of racism, and though they learned from that and are condemned by God from that and ultimately healed and reconcile with Moses and Zipporah, how the more so, these are saintly figures, how the more so we are likely to be vulnerable to this as well.
Yes, indeed.
And that we have the need to be able to begin to confront these challenges. And Andre, I just want to thank you on behalf of our entire kahal for being our teacher, being our, you know that Andre is our education director here at the synagogue, who leads our religious school and is a phenomenal Jewish educator on issues entirely unrelated to our topic of conversation this day. But I think that Andre, you have been our educator as well in this, and know that you are cherished by your Or Tzion family.
Thank you. I always say that as an educator and as a Jew of color, I'm a walking education, and it's important. But hopefully, I walk with everyone. And just to add to your point, even amongst all of that, Tzipporah's lineage was given an assignment in how the Mishkan moved through the desert. Even they were included in how we walk together in service of God. So may we understand all of that as that we all play an important part in that role as well.
Amen, amen. Andre, thank you so much. Special gratitude to my son Archer, who helped with the technology to enable us to bring you this today. And apologies to those who were online on Friday night and unable to connect and hear us. Know that the music was beautiful, the discussion vibrant, and of course you heard much of continuing development of those thoughts today. Andre,